Hey guys, thanks for joining us. It's August 13th, 2019. I'm your host, Justin, and as always, I'm joined by Perry.
Good news, everyone. We're back.
Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Management Clock. You could catch our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We're giving away a second Le'Veon Bell jersey that's autographed when we get to 300 Twitter followers. We're starting to get close to that, so make sure you follow us. And if you want a second chance to win, subscribe on YouTube. This is Clock Management. All right, guys. So today we're going to be getting into some fantasy basics to help out these new players. And, just if you're just doing your first league.
Whoa. Let's not jump the shark here, Justin. We just had our fantasy draft this weekend, didn't we?
That's true. Yeah.
Do you want to quickly go over?
Super excited about this.
Do you want to quickly go over maybe our starters real quick?
Yes, I do.
I'll do mine while you get yours pulled up here. So at quarterback, I took Matt Ryan. My running backs are Alvin Kamara and Nick Chubb. My flex is Leonard Fournette. My wide receivers are Tyreek Hill, Antonio Brown. My tight end is O.J. Howard. And I did not draft a kicker or a defense. We're in an 8-team league. I did not just draft a Goliath of a 12-team league. Don't worry.
I was just going to let them think that I was that amazing at this.
They already know we're not.
Yeah. So I drafted Cam Newton as my quarterback. My running backs are Aaron Jones, Le'Veon Bell. My flex, Josh Jacobs. My wide receivers are Devontae Adams and Keenan Allen. And I did the Vance dance at tight end.
The Vance dance.
Yep. And again, no kicker or defense, because if we did that, then we would have been giving you guys horrible advice the whole time.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, cool. So, yeah, it looks like today we're going to be talking about common mistakes that people make in their first year of fantasy, as well as some terminology that people should be aware of. And then we'll also go into roster positioning or roster construction, that sort of thing. But first, we have some news, right?
Yes. Let's start them out with some news no one cares about. So I'm going to save one of my news that no one cares about till after you finish your news.
Okay.
That way.
Okay. You want me to do mine first here?
Yeah, let's just do yours all together first.
Okay. So this is news people actually care about. Golden Tate, wide receiver for the Lions, did lose his appeal on a 4-game suspension for performance-enhancing drugs. Basically, I didn't think that he'd win this, right? The NFL has a zero-tolerance policy on it. He still claims that he did not take any performance-enhancing drugs, but I don't know. I'm not an expert. He's going to be out 4 games. That's all you need to know. Antonio Brown is back with the team, which is good because I drafted him. If you didn't know, Antonio Brown had left the Raiders and said that he would not be playing football ever again if he was not allowed to use his old helmet. He is not allowed to use his old helmet. He lost the appeal, and he said that he's good and he's going back to the team. So he will not be retiring, but his feet are still frozen.
We did kind of say, too, as I believe last time I said, I felt like that was kind of a gimmick to take attention away from his feet.
Yeah, it might have been. That's a good point, but they're still frozen, and they're still disgusting. Damien Harris, rookie running back with the Patriots. I think we've talked about him once or twice in the show. It's reported he's not going to see any more first-team reps in camp. I guess he's not having the best camp right now. And Sony Michel is healthy. And it appears that Sony Michel is the number 1 running back there. So that answers some questions. I think that's good to hear for people drafting Sony.
Thank you.
Andrew Luck update. The calf injury that we've been dealing with now for a few weeks. Apparently there's a minor bone. I think what's the quote here? I have it written down. Small bone injury. So still pretty vague, but at least it's not serious.
I actually just read a note on this as of like maybe an hour and a half ago. So apparently that was the person talking about the bone injury was just someone who didn't understand what they were talking about.
Wasn't it the owner?
Yeah. And so he had some sort of, I think it was a ligament or something, but it's developed into a high ankle injury.
Okay.
Not related to a bone.
Okay. Those can still linger, though, hang around. So
yeah, they said they're going to sit him all preseason.
I wouldn't be drafting Andrew Luck right now, especially with the value at quarterback. But, you know, I do own him in Dynasty, so I do hope he comes back. Christian McCaffrey, it's reported that he's willing and the Panthers are wanting to cede some of his goal line carries to some of the younger running backs or the backup running backs that they have there. I feel like this would be bigger news for a different running back other than Christian McCaffrey. To be completely honest, his points don't really come from the goal line, right? He's a pass catching back, and Cam Newton's been stealing goal line work from running backs there for a long time. So, yeah, it's not what you want to hear when it comes to your starting running back, especially when you're drafting in the top 3. But I feel like it's not quite as bad for him as it could be for other players. Does he move down your list at all with something here, something like that? No, not even to. Where do you have him right now?
Personally, number 1.
Okay, you wouldn't put him down below Saquon or Alvin yet?
No, because I feel like Saquon has. I mean, he's still, even if you take away some of his, he's still going to get more than Saquon will just because of the offense. So
it's true. It's true. I think Saquon will have a lot of yards, but maybe not a lot of scores. So
which is not what the team is threatening to take away from McCaffrey.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think I'd still have Christian McCaffrey's number 1 overall. But Emmanuel Sanders apparently had an additional surgery this offseason on his right ankle, as well as the Achilles repair on his left ankle, which is, he looks really good. All reports on Emmanuel Sanders are positive. He is full speed, full contact, making cuts, everything. So he's actually a steal now. Emmanuel Sanders has never been bad, but he's kind of a steal, especially for a 10 or 12 team league.
Yeah, it's scary to me because of those injuries, but you're right. It's all good reports.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, for how late he's going, you're probably not drafting him to start him. So Dak Prescott was offered a $30 million per year deal that he turned down. It's reported he wants at least $40 million a year. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's probably going to end up falling closer to $35 million, but I don't think it's going to happen before the season.
Yeah, I saw a report that said after seeing this, Pat Mahomes next year wants $100 million a year and full ownership of the team.
Yeah, I saw that too. You mentioned before, we hadn't talked about Zeke yet today, but you mentioned before that you think that this isn't good for the Cowboys overall.
Yeah, definitely, because they're trying to make a deal work for Dak, Zeke, and Amari. And now you have 2 of those players turning down that deal, both wanting, quite a bit more than what was offered to them. Like, that's going to make those deals hard to work. And it's like, who are the Cowboys going to give the deal to? Because the other player isn't going to be there. Who
would you give the deal to?
Man, if as a fantasy owner, I'm giving it to Zeke. As an NFL owner, I'm giving it to Dak and Amari.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if I wanted to win a Super Bowl, I'm giving it to Dak and Amari for sure. Zeke could be Todd Gurley next year. It could happen, Amari Cooper, who we just spoke about, he has a bruised heel, is considered day-to-day. I don't think it's anything serious. I wouldn't be concerned about that with drafting him. There's other concerns that we talked about in our wide receiver episode, but the heel isn't one of them. Dante Pettis, who you and I are both pretty high on to start this offseason.
Yes, second-year wide receiver in San Fran, looked really good.
Yeah. Reports coming out of camp right now are not good at all. It's it was reported by not Mike Shanahan, that's his dad. Kyle Shanahan, thank you. That Dante Pettis has to fight to make the starting role right now.
Yeah, and this kind of goes into what I was saying when you gave me the two of them, him and I think it was Boyd. Yeah, and Boyd to compare. Where I was saying like he hasn't had that chance to grow and follow and somewhat, learn as a receiver. He's just been thrust into that position, and it doesn't seem like it's gone well for him.
Yeah, I think that was a really good analysis because I think we're seeing it happen right now. So, Darrell Henderson, who a lot of people are very high on right now, running back for the Rams, considered one of the backups for Todd Gurley, he was terrible in his preseason opener. 6 carries for 13 yards and 1 catch for a -5 yards. He's going in like the 6th or 7th round right now. It's kind of frightening. I mean, it's just a preseason game, but and then Theo Riddick, fractured shoulder to miss 6 to 8 weeks. So he'll be missing probably the first 4 to 5 weeks of the regular season. It's a bummer as a Broncos fan. I wasn't really drafting him. I think it's good for Philip Lindsay, but
absolutely, yeah. Just like with McKinnon, kind of cleared up being injured. That kind of cleared up the San Francisco backfield a little bit.
Yeah, I think it hurts the Broncos as a team, which bums me out. But I think it's good for the fantasy relevance there. So, and that's the last piece of news that I had to talk about. Do you got any news that nobody cares about?
I do. So I got some Antonio Brown news related to the cold feet. So with that cold feet, Antonio Brown posted a video going into detail about how doctors were peeling away the skin on his foot.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, the exact wording was too much detail, which I can't help but agree with.
It reminds me of Austin Powers' Goldmember. He's peeling the dead skin off. So gross.
Yeah. Also, Antonio Brown wants all of you to help him find a new helmet. So do with that what you will. But
on Twitter, tweet out to him. He needs a new helmet.
Yeah, I've been sending him the 1920s helmets made of leather lately.
No, I drafted it. I need him to play.
Russell Wilson and Sierra are now part of the owners group for the Seattle Sounders. Yeah.
If you don't know what the Sounders are, it's a professional soccer team in Seattle.
Oh, yeah. So now another football team he's part of. Also, there's a hilarious video, which I know this news no one cares about, but you should definitely check it out, of the Texas Longhorns team being hypnotized.
Oh, I should check that out.
Yeah. And that's all the news that you don't care about.
Cool.
So let's get into this Fantasy 101.
Yeah, let's do it. You can start it off here with some the different league types. We throw a lot of names around, so.
Yeah, so we're going to go through a lot of terminology for you guys. So like we got our the different types of leagues that you'll hear us talk about. Is you got your redraft, which is basically your standard league format where every year you're choosing a whole new team. So you're not going to keep any of the players going into the next year.
Right. Redraft league, it's I would say the most common type of fantasy league, especially if you're just getting into it. If your buddies are asking you, hey, we're going to throw a league together, you want to give it a shot, it's probably a redraft league.
Yeah. And then you got a keeper league. So keeper league is a league where at the end of the year you get to choose, well, at the start of the following year, onto your second year, you'll get to choose one or two players, depending on how they do the settings, of players that you'll keep from your team the previous year, but you'll lose the pick in which you chose them from.
Right. So that's why finding really good value in players, that you took really late that ended up exploding into superstardom is super lucky. Somebody like Philip Lindsay, right? You picked Philip Lindsay last year in the last round, and now you get to keep Philip Lindsay, but you only lose your last round pick. So Yeah.
And then we got a dynasty league, which is a little bit more extreme version of that. You keep your entire team going forward. It's basically like you run a real NFL team. You manage positions. They usually have deeper rosters and IR slots and things like that as well.
Yeah, really fun. I like our dynasty league a lot.
Yeah, I think it's more enjoyable for me almost than just a normal redraft league if you're playing with just people you don't know.
I think it's the most competitive form of fantasy football, probably.
Yeah, and long-term planning.
Yeah.
And then you have IDP, which is individual defensive player leagues, which basically you have defensive players on your team, and it'll calculate things like tackles, tackles for a loss, fumbles, interceptions, things like that.
Yeah, it's a lot more research to do. It's a lot of work. We probably
won't talk about that much, but I just wanted to bring it up so people knew what it is if they hear the term.
Right. And
you want to go after talk about some draft types?
Yeah. So there's two main types of drafts that you'll see. The first one is an auction draft, which I think brings the highest level of skill involved. Basically, you're allotted a certain amount of money. It's imaginary money. Could be, I guess, but generally it's $100 is the average amount, and players are nominated. So if I had the first pick, basically I'm nominating that. I get to nominate the first player in the draft. So I could put anybody up there I want. I could put Todd Gurley or I could put Ben Roethlisberger, and basically people bid on that player. So Justin may bid $5 on Todd Gurley, then I bid $6, and it works just like an auction. And we have that budget that we have to work within of $100. And so you have to find the right balance there, right? Reaching up to grab somebody for $40 means you don't have that $40 for later in the draft. So it can be very competitive. There's a lot of strategy involved with it. I've done a couple auction drafts. I really enjoy them. I don't know.
Yeah, I've done one, and I really want to do another one.
Yeah. Maybe we'll sign up for one together. That'd be fun to do. We could do an auction mock draft for the show, maybe.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And then the other main type of draft, probably the most common type, is a snake draft. Basically, you go picks 1 through 12, and then 12 through 1, and then 1 through 12, 12 through 1, back and forth. Some leagues will set up interesting rules. I know in our league of record, our main league, in order to make it competitive for our draft competitions to decide the draft order, we set it up to where we go 1 through 8 right now, 1 through 8, 1 through 8. So we do that for 3 rounds, basically meaning the first pick becomes a lot more valuable, but then we'll snake after that. So when you hear snake draft, it just means you're going back and forth, 1 through 12, 12 through 1. When you hear auction league, it means you're working with a budget and you're basically building a team around that budget.
Yeah, so that's like the basic stuff you need to know before drafts take place. So things that you might need to know during a draft or related to the draft or players that you're looking at to draft is kind of what I'm going to get into next. So you have zero running back strategy, which is, basically it's a strategy where the person picking the team chooses not to go with any running backs at the beginning.
Yeah, a zero running back strategy. I know there's a lot of definitions around this.
Yeah.
How I define it is you don't go running back with your first 5 picks. So you go 5 picks without drafting a running back. It is very scary, but it has worked. A lot of people will do this if they end up we call it the turn. It's that if you're in a snake draft, that 12 spot, so you go 12-12, so you pick 2 times in a row, and you can get like the number 2 wide receiver in the league and the number 3 wide receiver in the league. So a lot of people will do it that way, and then maybe come back around to get a tight end like Travis Kelce. So it's a viable strategy. I don't think it's really that viable this year. But
man, I could tell you I never feel comfortable doing that.
It feels dirty, man.
Yeah, I don't like I don't like how my teams look when I've done in mock drafts. I really don't like to do it, but I know some people love it.
Yeah, definitely.
So when we talk about a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2, or same with running back 1, running back 2, quarterback, any position, if you hear us say that, wide receiver 1 is it's meaning like a wide receiver that is going to be like starter worthy on one of the teams. So basically, if there's 10 teams in your league, it'd be the wide receiver 1 through 10, or if there's 12 teams, it'd be the wide receiver 1 through 12. We're usually referencing 12 when we say that. Mm-hmm. And same for each position: running back, quarterback, every position.
Yeah, I would just, anytime you're hearing that, if you're listening to other podcasts or you're reading articles and you see the term wide receiver 1 or running back 1, it's probably 1 through 12. So if they're the 12th best wide receiver in the league, they're a wide receiver 1. If they're the 13th best, they're a wide receiver 2. That's basically how that works. And like Justin said, it's synonymous with running backs, with quarterbacks, with tight ends. So, yeah.
Yeah. So next, I know we talk about this a lot, is ADP. It's the average draft position of a player. So it's out of, whatever where you're drafting at. So like NFL shows their ADP, ESPN will show their ADP. From all of the people drafting in all of the leagues on their format, it'll show you where the average draft position of each player is. And that helps you to find value.
Right. Just to use Fantasy Pros as an example, because they have a really good system that we use a lot. Right. They take every mock draft that people do, and they just average draft position for each player. Where is Ezekiel Elliott taken? And then that way they can compile a list, and then you can use it to do your research. Yeah.
Yep. And then very similar, there's ECR, which is the expert consensus rankings, which is average of where a lot of experts have players ranked to give you what they think, which I actually like a little bit more than ADP, because you do get some, players that are drafting who just draft some crazy players, and you don't see that in experts. So
a lot of ECR rankings too will show you the deviation between the highest rank they have them at and the lowest rank they have them at. And I like to look for players that have the smallest deviation. So that means that experts really agree on the position of that player.
So after ECR, we got so this kind of tells you about the scoring of a team. It's it's into that. It's a PPR. You'll hear that sometimes, stands for points per reception. You'll hear people say half point PPR or full point PPR, which is kind of redundant because the word point's already in the abbreviation, but people say it. So we'll continue to say it.
Yeah. The big thing to note with PPR is that it changes the value of players, right? Christian McCaffrey, who loves to catch the ball at the running back position, becomes a lot more valuable in a PPR league than a standard league, I guess would be the opposite of PPR, where you don't get any points for catching the ball. So,
yeah. And I think there's a few petitions going to change so that way a standard league is PPR, and you'll have to come up with another term, because people half point PPR is basically your standard league at this point.
It is the best way to score. There we go. Perry Hooley, 2019. Write it down.
So next we got ceiling. I'm gonna combine these two. You got ceiling and floor. So with ceiling, you'll hear us talk about this player's ceiling is really high. That just means that player has the ability to score a lot of points for you. Like, he's got a really high ceiling, and then you'll hear us talk about players who, he has a high ceiling, but he's also got a low floor. And that means like that player, it could score you a lot of points, or he could do nothing.
Really good example in the past is Sammy Watkins, wide receiver, extremely high ceiling, some very, very high scoring games, He has the potential. He has the talent. But then he also has the potential of giving you 0 points in a game.
Yeah.
So high ceiling, low floor. And then we'll talk about players that have a very high floor but a low ceiling. Very safe players, right? Who would be a good example of that? Maybe Dak Prescott at quarterback, right? Dak Prescott's not going to throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns very often. Maybe he will once or twice, but he's always going to be very consistent, with that just under 300 yards and maybe 2 to 3 touchdowns.
Mark Ingram,
very high floor, not so high ceiling.
Yeah. I think both of those are at 9 points for him.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
Okay, so you got breakout. You'll hear us talk about this player's breakout year. It's like we were talking about with Pettis. He had, this was his opportunity for a breakout year where it's like he had his rookie year and you expect to see a huge jump in production for that player.
Yeah. Breakout. We'll talk about it all the time. We might say he's a potential breakout player, or he broke out last year or something like that. It's pretty synonymous with other sports, so I think it's something that people will probably recognize.
Yeah. And we got flyers. You'll hear us talking about taking a flyer on a guy. It's basically like if you're just taking kind of a shot on a guy that you don't know if he's going to succeed or not, but he has a chance to. A lot of times when there's an injury at like running back and there's no clear number 2 guy, you'll take a flyer on one of the 3 backups there.
Exactly. Yeah. The Rams right now with Todd Gurley, we don't know how that situation's going to play out with his knee. You could take a flyer on one of these other running backs that are sitting there behind him without really knowing exactly what's going to happen. It's kind of going with your gut, I guess would be a good way to describe it.
Yeah. And then basically the opposite situation is a handcuff when you know exactly who the backup running back is.
Yeah.
So good example of that is for the last few years, Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman down there in Atlanta. They if one of them went down, the other one was great to own. So it was just you needed to own both of them.
Yeah, I know personally I got caught up with trying to have handcuffs a few years ago. Make sure I have my handcuff. Not everybody has a handcuff, right?
Yeah.
Some backfields, if the main running back gets hurt, there is no handcuff. It becomes 3 or 4 guys trying to fill that role. A really good example of a really good handcuff this year is Latavius Murray. Murray, backup running back for the Saints. If Alvin Kamara goes down, Latavius Murray becomes a number 1 running back, in my opinion. Yeah. Let's see. What would be a bad example? Saquon Barkley, right? There is no handcuff for Saquon Barkley. If you are a Saquon Barkley owner, do not go out and try and find a handcuff for Saquon Barkley. If Saquon Barkley gets hurt, you're screwed. You're quacked, right?
Yeah, you're not going for Gilman.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding.
So next you got sleepers. It's basically a player that you're drafting earlier than where they're their ADP, because you're expecting that player to outperform their ADP, basically.
Right. Yeah. Sleeper. These are the things you gotta try and keep, secret. You don't want your friends to know who your sleepers are. Everybody knows who the top guys are, right? You don't want your friends to know who the sleepers are because you're gonna snag them.
2 years ago, I told you guys Tyreek Hill was my sleeper, and you all just thought I was crazy.
I still think that he's a bust.
Yeah. I drafted him, I think, in like the 6th round.
Yeah.
I've also had some that are just legitimate crazy, so I can understand why you guys thought that.
Hey, man, everybody told me that Jordan Howard was bad, but he still did good for me every year. I also picked up Devontae Freeman the year he busted. I drafted him, and I dropped him just before the draft to pick up my defense. It was so sad.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we could talk about that one for a full episode. So I'm gonna keep going. We got stacking. That's like choosing players where their points are going to multiply on your team. So if you had Pat Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, that'd be stacking, because Pat Mahomes throws a touchdown, Tyreek Hill, and now you're getting points for or double the touchdown points there.
Yeah. Some people like to stack like wide receivers on a team. I hate that personally. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'm going to get any touchdown that gets thrown to one of these. Well, if I have Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, well, if Stephon Diggs catches a touchdown, that means Adam Thielen's not catching that touchdown. I'd rather have receivers on different teams, and then they could both catch a touchdown at that point. So that's how I feel about it personally.
I completely agree with you there, because I think, like, if I have the number one wide receiver on two teams, and I'm looking at the percent of touchdowns caught on those teams, like the number one wide receiver is probably catching more than the number two on that team, which means if I own two number ones, percent-wise, I'm getting more touchdowns.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't stack wide receivers. It's never good. It's just not good. Even running back wide receiver, to be completely honest with you, I don't love, but
yeah, I'm okay with it. I have reservations on it, though.
Yeah, I'll avoid it if I can.
All right, okay. So that's all the stuff I think you need to know before drafting or during a draft, basically.
Sure.
You want to get into some of this, like, rest of the season stuff?
Yeah, so the rest of the season stuff, bench players, basically we'd call this depth. I think we talk about depth later on, but I can cover them both right now. Basically, when you're drafting, you obviously find your starting lineup, people that you know are going to be there, the anchors of your team, however you'd like to describe them, and then you want to fill in depth into your bench, right? If somebody gets hurt, somebody's on a bye week, if somebody underperforms, you got another guy ready to go. So that's where your bench players comes in, your depth. Boom or bust. We'll talk about boom or bust all the time. It's kind of like we were just talking, the high ceiling, low floor, right? If a player's boom or bust, that means they're risky, right? They could win you a week, they could lose you a week. Tyreek Hill has been that way a little bit. I think he's more boom. Deshaun Jackson is a perfect example. Deshaun Jackson has had games where he looks like the best receiver in the history of football. And then Deshaun Jackson has had games where you didn't know that he was on the team. Yeah. So boom, bust, right?
Fitz magic.
Yeah, Fitz magic is boom bust. But hey, don't you dare. Don't hate on Fitz magic.
Just saying.
Right? Down there in Miami, dude, enjoying the sun. Okay. Bye weeks. Just talked about bye weeks. So bye weeks, this is kind of an interesting topic. Bye weeks in the NFL, I do not like the way they work. They kind of ramp up and then they ramp down. So middle of the season, most teams have their bye weeks, but there are some teams that'll have a bye week. I think they start week 4. Yeah. Do you draft with bye weeks in mind, Justin?
Not at all.
Me neither. I don't care.
I've had times where I've gotten I've had 2, I think 3 at one time, wide receivers that had a week 4 bye week. And that kind of sucked. But I mean, they played the rest of the season. So
yeah, exactly. Also, say I have a bad week 8 with bye weeks, right? That means most of my players are on bye week 8. I can't draft thinking that my team's going to look the exact same week 8 as it does week 1. I'm not going to keep that in mind. I'm just going to draft the best team possible. If I have a dynamite team for every week but week 8, fine. I'll take a loss on week 8 if I have to. That's no big deal.
Yeah.
A fantasy cheat sheet. Basically, when you're drafting, you take down some notes. I know Justin does this. I do this as well. All off season and even into the season, I'm taking notes on players that I like for next year. So this is avoid this player because such and such, because I'm not going to remember that coming into the next year. I'm not going to remember that when I'm sitting there drafting
Absolutely.
Yeah.
During playoffs and stuff, when you during the NFL playoffs, all these notes you want to take down about players, because you're not during, fantasy season's over. So it's hard to keep that in mind after. So I'll keep a running log.
I did that with Sony Michel and the Patriots this offseason. That guy had a dynamite postseason, and I just wanted to make sure I remembered that for drafts. I didn't
really appreciate all the Sony Michel comments.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, I drafted him as one of my backup running backs. So.
Yeah, I know. I hate you. Cut, drop, release basically all means the same thing. Means you're gonna cut a player for whatever reason. Usually it's because you're picking up another player, but sometimes you do a 2-for-1 trade. We'll kind of talk about trades here in a minute, but you have a certain amount of players you can have on your roster. If you do for a 2-for-1 trade, you will have to create room by dropping, cutting, or releasing a player. Deep leagues, when we say a deep league, that means leagues are typically 12 or more teams. It means that talent pool, that depth of players that you have to pick from becomes much larger because there's more teams to fill. They're usually more difficult leagues to do well. You have to do a lot of research. You're taking a lot of flyers on players. A lot more rookies are drafted, that sort of thing.
Yep.
I love deep leagues.
Yeah, and you'll see those a lot in like dynasty and keeper leagues. I think that's just more because you have more experienced and competitive players in those.
Absolutely. Depth chart. We talk about depth chart. It's more of an NFL term, but it's basically the hierarchy within each position on a team. So when we say he's the number 4 wide receiver on the depth chart, that means that he's only going to make it in the game in 4 wide receiver sets generally. Not always the case, but generally. So if you're drafting somebody like from the Green Bay Packers, Geronimo Allison versus Marquez Valdez-Scantling, it's very important. We want to know who's the number 2 wide receiver on the depth chart and who's the number 3 wide receiver on the depth chart. The number 2 has a lot more value than the number 3.
Yeah.
Let's see. Fab. Talking about Fab. I love Fab. We need to do a Fab league too as well.
I know. Yeah. I like doing the idea of an auction league that has Fab that also does Fab. So
yeah. So Fab is free agent acquisition budget. So just like I was talking about with an auction league, you have a budget for the season. So anytime a player goes up on waivers, you have to make a bid for that player. You have to say, I'm willing to pay X number of dollars to get this player on my team. So it's a silent auction though.
Yeah.
So if I put $7 and Justin puts $8, Justin's winning that player. I keep my $7, but I don't get the player. So it really makes you put your money where your mouth is on how much you're willing to pay for a player when it comes to waivers.
And it could be hilarious to mock your friends when they way overpay for a player. You see someone put $20 on Fab and the next person down had $4 on him.
Then you know you really overpaid. And I'm going to jump ahead to talk about waivers because it's a good time to talk about it. Waivers basically mean it's players that you're picking up during the season. Waivers generally go through on an average league on Wednesday morning and on Friday morning. Yeah. So basically, if I want a player, I will say I want X player, and I'll put him in my waiver priority, right? Justin will also put that player in if he wants that player. If Justin is doing poorly in the league, he has a worse record than me. He has a higher waiver priority. If that player comes around and we've both put in for it, and Justin has a higher waiver priority, he will get that player.
Yeah, so it's important to look at your waiver priority just so you know where you're at in it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to pick up more than one player, so that way you could prioritize those players. So you're trying to pick up the player who you think most people are trying to get first.
Absolutely. It's important to not blow your number 1 waiver priority on a kicker because you're trying to replace a kicker on bye week, right? If there's somebody that you want to make sure they're in your number 1 waiver spot. It's also important to pay attention who else has a higher priority than you and what do they need. So waivers are probably the most work that you'll do in season. I think you'd probably agree with that. But
unless you're trying to make a trade with Joel Brenner.
Yeah. #Brenner. Do not trade with Joel Brenner. He will make you work. He'll make you work for it. Okay, so jumping back up here, why don't you take some of these, Justin? I feel like I'm just talking too much.
All right. Where did you left at Fab?
Flex.
Yeah, so,
Flex.
Yeah, the Flex. Is that like? Are we talking about workouts or?
Only with Joel Brennar.
So Flex is it's a like specialty roster spot where you could put a bunch of different positions in there. So normally it's a normal flex is going to be a wide receiver or a running back. Sometimes you'll see a tight end there as well, depending on your league. And then I'm going to go ahead and jump right into this other one, which is super flex. And the super flex is basically one where you could put not any skill position in there. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. You can't put a kicker or defense in there. And if you ever wanted to, you should stop playing fantasy football.
Yeah, absolutely. Super flex leagues are really fun, but I will say it almost always just turns into a 2-quarterback league.
Yeah, that's my only. I'm not a big fan of them, just because it's a 2-quarterback league at that point.
Sure.
Unless you have some amazing roster.
Yeah. Free agent. What's up with the free agent, Justin?
Yeah, so just like the NFL, that's a player without a team, without a home. You got to welcome him, bring him in, give him a home.
Yeah.
We got IR next, injured reserve. Like I was saying, dynasty leagues, you'll see this a lot in there. It's empty roster spots, basically. It doesn't affect your total number of players on your team. So if you have a player that's injured or on IR, you can move them into that slot, but they can't come out of that slot unless you clear up a spot on your team for them. I love these. In our Dynasty League, I keep those filled. We have some managers that don't use them at all, and I feel like that's why they're not winning in our league, because I've been able to stash some good players in there.
Yeah. Mock draft, we've done a mock draft on the show.
Check it out, episode 1.
Episode 1. Basically, mock draft it's a fake draft. It's a practice draft. You do it. You can do them automated, where it just drafts based on ADP, or you can do them with your friends. But you have to just practice the draft. I suggest doing quite a few of them before you draft. That way, you have a really good understanding of where players are going. It's a good way to practice, so you don't look stupid when you do walk into your draft and you don't pick somebody you shouldn't.
Yeah. Next, we got projections, which are irrelevant. Don't look at them. It's an educated guess based on some sort of algorithm that whatever website you're on has used to predict how many points that player is going to score that week, and it is never right.
Ever. Projections are useless. They will not help you.
Yeah, if you get number 1 in the projections, you literally win nothing.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
We already talked about QB1, RB1. So we'll talk about running back by committee. Yeah.
You'll hear referenced as RBBC sometimes. And that's basically like you look at a place like Philadelphia or Seattle in the past few years. They've done that, where there is not one starter running back. It could be one of a few guys. They all just kind of carry the load together.
Yeah. So I would tend to avoid running back by committee.
Oh, yeah.
In most situations. In Seattle right now, Chris Carson and Rashad Penny, both, I would own them both.
Yeah,
Chris Carson,
I feel like that's developed into a handcuff situation.
Yeah, I would agree.
Stream. So in a lot of leagues, they don't restrict how many movements of players you could do, add drops or releasing and picking up players during a season. Those things are great because if that is the case, how we're talking about how there's so much value at quarterback, that's one of those positions where you could stream that every week and just pick up a new quarterback depending on who they're playing. And like past years, they'd be like, who's playing the Browns this year? Don't do that this year. But past years, that would be great.
Yeah. Tampa Bay. Who's playing Tampa Bay this year?
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Go on. Go ahead. Sorry.
You're good. Yeah. So next we got trades. Basically, when you agree with another player to swap 2 players, seems pretty straightforward. There's some strategies to it. Like I like to look at the other person's team and see where they're hurting at, and try and find a trade partner, someone who I have an excess of wide receivers that are all startable, for example, and they're hurting at wide receiver, but they have a running back that I could start.
Yeah. I don't look for a specific player. I look at somebody exactly like Justin was saying. Is there somebody that I can make a possible trade with? Somebody that I know I could be helping so I can help myself.
And I am always trying to improve my team because that's the goal of any trade.
Yes.
And I think everyone should do the same. I have had people that are like, well, you're just trying to improve your team. Yes, I am, because that is the point of fantasy football. But also, I'm not trying to hurt your team because that doesn't make you a good trade partner, and then no one wants to trade with you.
Yep.
All right, moving on, though. Transaction. That's just any change in your roster. So, like I said, some leagues will count your transactions and limit them. If you do that, try not to set that to too low of a number because that'll take away the fun in the league.
Yeah. We have ours set to 25 as an example, and it works out pretty well.
Yeah. I usually get pretty close to that, but I think I only used them all 1 year, and that was a horrible year.
That was a bad year for you.
Undroppable. Sorry, Perry. So it's a list of elite players, usually decided by whatever platform you're using, that you just can't be dropped. And that's just to keep people from trying to ruin your league by dropping like really good players because they're losing and they just want to screw the league up.
Yeah. All right. We already talked about waivers. We talked about waiver priority. Collusion. We talked about collusion. That's when two owners work together to make one of them better or both of them better to beat somebody else, however you'd like to look at it. It's cheating.
I would say one of them better, because if you're making both of them better, that's just a trade.
Sure. Okay, so one of them better, that's cheating. So anytime you see something that looks a little fishy, bring it up, point it out, bring it to light.
Just yell collusion at their face as loud as you can.
Yeah, like in Game of Thrones when Cersei's walking down and they're all shame. Do that to them. Shame them.
Pretending like I know what you're talking about because I'm one of the 8 people on Earth who have not watched Game of Thrones. You could go ahead and shame me now.
Yeah, you're no son of mine.
All right, so elite, you'll hear us talk about that all the time. This elite wide receiver or this elite running back, and that's just a guy at the top of the class and his position, running backs, wide receivers.
Yeah. Trade bait, good players that you can offer. I guess I would define trade bait as, hey, I want player A for player B, but I'll throw in player C to sweeten the deal. I guess that's how I envision trade bait.
Yeah, exactly. Or even like there's times where I'll draft a player, thinking that, hey, I might be able to trade this guy later on because I think he'll be good, even though I don't need him in that because I have such depth there. Yeah.
And then a Vulture Back.
Oh God.
Who's the ultimate Vulture Back?
Oh man, what's his name? He doesn't even play anymore, but in Carolina. Oh, Carolina. Yeah.
I was gonna say LeGarrette Blount.
Oh, LeGarrette Blount. Yeah, he's great at that. But no, Sean would know exactly.
D'Angelo Williams?
No, before him.
Oh man,
I hated him so much. He is a big dude, and he literally was the best at running the ball 1 yard. Oh, I hated him so much.
Which is the definition of a Vulture Back. You might have your number one guy who just drove down the whole field running the ball. He's gotten 40, 50 yards in one drive. They get to the 1 yard line, and the backup running back comes in and takes the touchdown. He vultured the touchdown from your starting running back is basically what a Vulture Back is. Yeah. And I can see Justin trying to figure out who he thinks it is.
You could go ahead. Yeah. I'm going to figure this guy's name out.
I wanted to go over 2 terms that you might hear very often in regards to how good a player is. And the first one is yards per carry, or YPC. It's a very simple stat that doesn't show the whole story oftentimes with running backs. So I just wanted to go over it with you for a moment. Yards per carry, the average number of yards gained per rushing attempt. So an example, Zeke last year had 304 carries for 1,435 yards, which comes out to 4.7 yards per carry. So you'll notice that he had a lot of yards with a lot of attempts. So basically, a lot of times you'll see players that have a very high yards per carry, but not a lot of attempts. So a player might have something like 6 rushes and he'll rush for 72 yards. But one of those rushes is a 65-yard run, which gives him like a 12-yard average per carry, which is just absurd, right? And that doesn't make them a good running back. It just makes them.
Speaking of not a good running back, it's Mike Tolbert.
Oh, Mike Tolbert. Sean would know Mike Tolbert. Producer Sean. So basically what I'm trying to say is don't read so much into yards per carry. You really need to dig deeper, look at the attempts. The attempts are what matter, and then you find the actual yards per carry. I know that some people will eliminate all runs over 10 yards or 15 yards from their yards per carry. Then you get a more accurate representation of what that running back actually does on an average run.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. Average depth of target. So this has to do with you can have average depth of target for a wide receiver or for a quarterback. I was going to talk today in regards to a quarterback. So basically, this is the distance the ball travels in the air. So the wide receiver may catch the ball and continue running. Those running yards do not count for the average depth of target. It's the number of passes divided by the total number of yards in the air. So Patrick Mahomes last year in 2018 had 5,330 yards in the air for all pass attempts. That doesn't mean all catches. That's attempts. He threw the ball 580 times, which comes out to 9.2 yards per attempt, essentially, which is pretty good. It ranked 3rd in the NFL. When I say good, I think you want a quarterback that's throwing the ball further on average. That way,
yeah, like I really like that stat. Just wide receiver and quarterback both.
Yeah.
Just because it helps tell you where they're at. Like you don't want a wide receiver that's catching the ball for 3 yards every play.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay if you're in a PPR, but you'd rather have him catch it for 30 yards.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just wanted to go over those because, you may be reading articles or listening to us, and we may throw those two things out there nonchalantly, and you have no idea what we're talking about. So now you do.
In case you guys are wondering as well, Perry is not living in a storage unit.
I am not.
Yeah, he's currently recording at his brother's house, so he's had to set up his computer somewhere where it could be quiet for us to record.
In the garage. Hopefully it's quiet. I feel like it may be quieter than my apartment was, so
yeah,
could be good.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you follow us on Twitter again at Management Clock. And you got any last words for us there, Perry?
No, I just want to get rid of this Le'Veon Bell jersey. I feel like we've been talking about Le'Veon Bell jerseys forever. So get your friend.
I have him on my team this year.
Well, get rid of the jersey. I feel like it's good luck for you to have it.
Twitter just so I can
try and win
subscribe. Yeah. And then we'll give it away a 3rd time.
I don't think that works that way.
No, definitely not.
Have your friends follow us, guys. We'll catch you next time, Friday, for the news episode, okay?
And that's it.